In what ways has your international experience impacted your professional life and career choices? Megan, you want to start?
Yes. So I'm kind of in a situation where I'm like figuring out where I want my life to go, which, maybe we can all relate. But having that French experience, I love teaching, and I discovered this later in my OU career. So I didn't major in education, but I knew that teaching was going to be something that I wanted to pursue. And having these French skills made it possible for me now I'm a teacher and I'm able to teach French. And I think that's, I studied abroad in France. I spent a lot of time traveling in France, and the skills that I learned and the cultural knowledge that I gained while I was there are, that's what's making me able to do my job today. But as I look ahead to, continued professional development, I know that I want an international experience to be part of that. And I think that's stemming from the great experiences I had abroad. So, it's enabling me to do a job right now to save money to do something abroad in the future, which is, I think, really exciting. So we'll see what happens.
Chloe?
I think my international experience made me a more competitive candidate, I would say. I didn't really have a typical job hunting process. I think it absolutely helped when I looked at graduate schools. My program in grad school was international affairs, global governance, politics, and security. So if I hadn't gone to Switzerland, I really don't think I would have. I honestly don't even know if I would have been accepted, but because I drew upon a lot of the things that I'd been exposed to, learned about, researched while I was there. So that was really helpful in my curriculum as well, going through my 2 years at American. But I think I hopped into an internship, and then that led to a job with the same organization. So I think that it still makes me a bit of a competitive candidate as I search for other positions within this organization. Just having that to draw upon and having that academic experience is really useful to the things that I'm working with right now. So I think it's good to draw upon, and having the language as well is always super helpful in everything that you might want to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Alexander?
So my experience is, in a sense, more akin to Chloe's in a sense, because I would say that most of my life has been an international experience, having grown up in Puerto Rico, having family in the US that, sometimes I would go visit, and then eventually coming to, in a sense, live in the United States most of the year for the last 4 years, going to Ohio Wesleyan, and basically making the move soon to still within the United States, in Chicago. So I think even before we factor in my study abroad program in France, being, that's already been an international experience. Add France in, which means that, I've sort of branched out and seen more of the world and learned more of of what other cultures there are out there, aside from the two that I had been exposed to my whole life up until that point. I believe that did make me a pretty substantial candidate for the program that I'm in, which, for some context, the program that I'm doing my master's in, it's a intensive 1-year program, master's program, the Committee on International Relations at the University of Chicago. And this is not a program that just anyone can get into. You need to be a pretty strong candidate to be able to have these people say, oh, this person can handle doing an entire master's program in the span of a year. So I think that, for a program in international relations, as someone who has studied abroad, who's basically lived in, if we were to count Puerto Rico as a separate entity, 2 countries, I think that that's definitely helped me out a lot for the grad school process. Not so much for job hunting in a sense, because my only job experience, and I'm going to be very frank here, the only job experience I have outside of an internship that I did last year is working on campus, which maybe having these international experiences, depending on the job, may not be the make or break point, So I think that really having done all these things is what made me a stronger candidate as opposed to the other things that I've done. So it really just goes to show how important being exposed to other cultures and how important traveling can be depending on what it is you're trying to pursue.
And yeah, I'll finish up. It's a bit of a odd question for me because ever since, like, after I graduated from OU, 16 days later, I moved to Germany. Like, there was no break. So for me, my international experience definitely got me into grad school. I would not be at the school had I not lived in multiple countries. The language skills I have, I mean, I speak 3 languages plus a bit of Spanish, and to work in the EU, everyone speaks at least 2 languages fluently. So their native language and English, most people have at least 3 fluent. It's not uncommon to have friends who speak 6 languages. And for me to say like, oh, I speak fluent French, it sounds cool, but it's not because it's not 6 languages. So I'm working on it. But yeah, I mean, the languages and the international experience really got me where I am today, and it will be the thing that gets me further. Which is why I'm at school in Germany, because if I want to work outside of the US, you kind of have to take the step early on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because most of the world is, bilingual or speaks multiple languages. And, we think we're impressive when we learn Spanish in high school. Megan, did you go already? Okay, wonderful. How has living abroad shaped your outlook in the US or on the US? Chloe?
Interesting question. Given that my mom is half French and was spent the first several years of her life there, I think I've been to France a few times before I started studying the language just to visit some family. So I think I already had an interesting outlook on maybe just France versus the US, but going to Switzerland, I definitely noticed some of the same elements that I had seen in France. I love a lot of the aspects of life out there, just like slower pace, especially now that I'm in the DC area. Everything is go, go, go. My job is 120% all the time. Everyone's always on the move looking for something to do. I never felt that over there. They were just cool, calm, collected, happy as can be. Let's go drive by the water, and just sit here for hours and just enjoy life and enjoy our food, enjoy our meals for hours. I definitely wish some of those lifestyle aspects were here in the US, but that's why I'd like to go back over there and live someday. So, I want to go get that, but it always puts you in perspective as to, how things are different everywhere. And it's good to get that experience, I think, regardless of where you go.
Yeah, I can go next. It has definitely helped me clarify the US institutional systems down to a 2-sentence, this is what the Electoral College is, or this is how the judicial system works, or this is Black Lives Matter in 2 sentences. Because these are the things that people ask you about at 2 a.m. when you are out at a party and someone's like, oh my gosh, you're American, let's talk about the Electoral College. Had I not had situations like this where they really were relying on me for truthful information that was unbiased, then I probably wouldn't have clarified them for myself, let's be honest.
How do I word this? No country's perfect. There is no perfect country out there. Let's be realistic. But having studied abroad really showed me, well, I already had certain perspectives on the United States before coming to Ohio Wesleyan to begin with, being from Puerto Rico. But after France, it really just solidified the fact that, yes, the US has its strong points, but it is also there are very much some areas where it could do better. One of them is healthcare. I had the misfortune of getting chickenpox during the 3rd week of my study abroad program, which was abysmal timing. try to imagine how much it would have cost to, treat chickenpox with basic medication in the United States versus maybe what I spent 25 euros on everything that I needed to be able to get over chickenpox in France. Whereas here, between the doctor's appointment, especially if you don't have insurance, and any medication, if you're prescribed medication and it's not something that you just get over the counter. And in France, I went to the emergency room. I didn't pay a dime there, but then the medication, it was prescription, and it was like 25 euro for all the medication. So it really put things into perspective on, wow, this is what American taxpayer dollars could be doing, and it's not. So I think that for as much as the United States prides itself in being one of the best countries in the world, it really showed to me that there are definitely some areas where where America is lacking. Not to say that, it really makes this country the worst, but for as much as it builds itself up, there are definitely things that they could be doing a lot better, to say the least.
Can I just tag onto this? I have some super complicated personal health issues, and the medicine I am required to take to keep me alive in the US is $14,000 a month, which I don't pay. It goes to the insurance, but still the official bill says $14,000. In Germany, again, weird insurance system and German bureaucracy is probably the worst I've ever encountered. It's terrible. But here it costs 800 euros a month, and then that gets billed back to insurance. So, I mean, I have to pay it up front here in Germany versus in the US, it gets billed directly to the insurance. However, it's 800 and not 14,000. So.
Yeah, no, I hear all you guys. I think like at a very basic level, the pace of life, the food, the fashion is all better in France. There are obviously lots of other deeper issues that need to be explored. I think when I was studying in 2016 during the summer prior to the election, and I remember going to a museum and the man saying, "Have you decided?" And I was so confused, and I thought it was the language barrier. He just meant, "Have you decided who you're voting for?" That was a question that I was asked often, and it opened my eyes to how much the world has its eyes on us, which is not something that I had really experienced. I think though that I learned most, my biggest perspective of the US was from my move from Boston to Delaware, Ohio. So I think that was a big one for me, but just totally different places. But yeah, you learn a lot about the place you're from when you leave it. And I think that was really important for me.
Yeah, one of my favorite experiences and that helped shape like my outlook on the US was when students at school would ask me, "Is it like Mean Girls?" No, not exactly. But yeah, I was in Brazil during their election year, which definitely, it was very interesting to me as somebody interested in politics. But moving on, how did studying abroad change your perspectives on learning, culture, and language? Alexander, if you want to get us started.
Could you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Absolutely. So how did studying abroad change your perspective on learning, culture, and language?
I think that when it comes to language, one of the biggest ones was how exposure to a particular language helps you a lot more than just learning it in the classroom from a textbook. That's really the basic that I realized on the language aspect, because I thought, oh yeah, this will help my French. I didn't realize how much it would help to be speaking to people in French the majority of the time I was in Avignon. As far as culture is concerned, I think that another thing that I started to learn in Avignon, but then I broadened my horizons on that in my last 2 years at Ohio Wesleyan, was just how interconnected different cultures are in ways that we might not perceive. Just like how French culture and, North African culture, Arab culture, they're interconnected in more ways than you'd think. In a lot of ways, due to French colonization of these regions, but where one would think that it's more so French culture influences these areas that were colonized. Yes, it's true, but it's also true in the reverse. There are definitely a lot of ways in which North African culture, Arab culture, um, and even ways in which those two intersect with each other. Um, it just goes to show how even in the reverse, the history of colonization on the part of France also altered, or well, altered makes it sound negative. Also allowed French culture to evolve in ways in which all of these different cultural identities kind of intersect in ways maybe we might not necessarily understand. Kind of how Latin American culture is very much present within American culture. There's the fact that are a lot of people who come from different countries in Latin America to live in the United States. Also, the baseline fact that part of the United States used to be Mexico. And so a lot of people who were essentially displaced all of a sudden, adapted to, oh, we're Mexican, but we're also kind of basically Americans now. And that helped introduce Latin American culture to what was the still growing United States at the time. So it just goes to show how it just kind of solidified the fact that cultures mix in ways that we might not necessarily see if we're, kind of just moving forward, living our own lives, living in our own bubble.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Chloe, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I can add. I think the biggest thing I took away was how important learning languages is, just in Europe specifically, and how interested they are in that. It starts from a young age, and my host family was pretty mixed. My host father was from Egypt originally. My host mother is from the Swiss German part of the country. So their kids spoke fluent French, because they lived in Geneva. They spoke Arabic. They were learning German. They spoke English. It was just like a normal thing for them to know 4 languages. And they wanted to learn more, and they had a house in Italy. So they spoke, a little bit of Italian because they would go every summer. So, it just kind of reinforced to me that, it's normal for them, and they love, they love learning languages. It's like a super important cultural thing. And I just kind of wish that was mirrored more here and elsewhere.
Oh yeah, Chloe. I think as a language teacher, I feel often like I am doing like a hard sell for French as something that is valuable. But I think to your question, Brittany, being abroad shaped the way that I teach in such a powerful way, because I saw firsthand how important it is to learn culture as you learn language. And so in my classroom, trying my absolute hardest, especially these days, to bring cultural artifacts, whether they are articles or movies or whatever it may be, videos, into the classroom, so that my students are hearing and seeing French from France, French from other places like Canada or Morocco or Algeria, because it's so important to see those things and to realize that the study of language is so much more than that, and that it's really the study of the world around us, and that STEM is important, but so is language. That is something that I'm really passionate about. I just rambled. Anyway, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't emphasize that any more than you guys just did. The only thing I would add is that language learning is something that people don't even think about here, versus for us, if I say I had a French major, they're like, well, cool, but like, what do you do? Because for them, it's like, oh, I get a degree in literature and happen to do it in German, French, and English all at the same time. So I think language is super important, but it's also important to have something else you do alongside it so that you can kind of combine the two, because learning a language, while incredibly impressive, and I wish I could do it in 2 days, it's not as applicable if you ever go to that country. So if you're in the US, maybe speaking a foreign language is helpful, but in Germany, like, okay, French is great, but I have to be able to do something with it in order to use it. So I can't just apply for a job and be like, oh, I speak German, here's a job. It's like, I speak German and I have these hard skills that I will apply to the job. So yeah, I just say double major or take care that your interests lie beyond the realm of grammar.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How have your international experiences shaped your personal life and the choices that you have made? Megan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I wish they had shaped them more, to be honest. Right after graduating, I was offered a really competitive fellowship that I took, but it was in Indiana. So I wish that I had continued to feel that push to go to France, because I was also offered a job there. But I am glad that I went to learn how to be a teacher. And I hope that, as I go forward as an adult in this world, that I will continue to push myself. Right now, I'm actually working with OWU to apply for some programs in France, which is it's just an amazing thing. Like the way that OWU, I've been gone for 2 years, and yet Dr. Sokolsky and I have been emailing all the time. Like, it's really incredible, Dr. Lewis, the connection that really the OWU connection is not just a made up marketing scheme. So that's been really powerful for me. And the positive experiences I had, for example, with Chloe, or in Avignon, like Alex was there, are really pushing me to seek those out more so that I can be a better teacher and also just a more informed French speaker. Yeah.
I can go next. Yeah, I mean, it completely changed my entire future. To be perfectly honest, I was that super stereotypical human who in my second semester of studying abroad, I met a guy and then spent the next 2 years flying here and there to meet him in various places of the world. I moved to France, partially to teach and be immersed in French, also because I knew I wanted to do grad school in Europe and I wanted kind of a home base to do visits from and jump off, but also, to be with the guy. And then I moved to Berlin just because that's what felt right in my personal life. And I mean, I wouldn't be here if I felt like I should be somewhere else. At this point, my entire personal life is based off of me being somewhere in Europe. I don't have possessions anywhere else. I don't call anywhere else home. This is home.
Chloe, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, my time in Switzerland really changed the course of my life right after graduation. I decided to go to grad school kind of on a whim, applied really late, thanks to Dr. Lewis and all of her help to get me into grad school. Got there, knew I wanted to do something still internationally focused. I didn't really want to use my international business major per se. And I think going to Switzerland really kind of helped me figure out I didn't want to go into business long term. It's a good backup that I have in my pocket. All those finance classes and econ things that I took, I have good additional skills that I can grow on, but I knew that I wanted to do something else, and I still want to go abroad, live abroad, work abroad. That's like a life goal, and I think that going to Switzerland kind of helped me figure that out. When I will get there, that's the real question. I'm not sure, but it kind of is pushing me in that direction to kind of expand my horizons more.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Alexander?
I think one of the ways in which it kind of shaped my personal life is sort of, well, in ways that I haven't yet been able to act upon. It's me wanting to see more of France and also now see more of, French Canada. But, because those are, one is because I have most experience in seeing, but I felt like I didn't see as much as I should have. The other because it's closer to home. So, start with that. But I haven't been able to act on that, which is the only sad part, because once I graduated OWU, I could have, taken the gap year and maybe done some traveling, but when this opportunity at the University of Chicago presented itself, where, oh, this is 1 year, and I wouldn't, and I'm in a place financially where I can actually do this right now. Let's do this. And maybe put off, traveling, seeing more of France or anywhere else, maybe at least for a year. And while I figure that out, I do know that I do want to look into potential jobs or other like programs. I want to look for things outside of the United States, which I guess, having traveled as much as I have, having been to France really helped me push, like, oh, I could feel more comfortable looking in more places than I would have been prior to it. Because, the US has been home for a while, but I think that I want to see more of the world and see if maybe this is, what I want to call my, I guess, kind of like if I were a rescue of my forever home. um, so it's like, oh, is this where I want to spend the rest of my life, or would I be able to grow more as a person somewhere else? And that's something that I want to do, but not something that I've had the opportunity to yet. So that's like on the agenda. I had to put a pin on that because I just couldn't pass this opportunity at Chicago up.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, that's an incredible opportunity, and it's only 1 year, so you can definitely travel afterwards. All right. Megan, did you go? All right, that's what I wanted to make sure I'm not skipping anybody. Okay. And then these last two questions are especially important for the students planning to study abroad who are in this discussion. Students sometimes express fear that they'll struggle studying a foreign language or studying in a foreign language. What advice do you have for them?
Don't take classes at 8 in the morning. That's the biggest one. In my determination to learn French, I signed up for this class at a French university, which is like something you can do to push yourself, especially if you're in a program with all American students. I took this class. I don't remember half the stuff I learned in it. Actually, most of the stuff I learned in it. It was at 8 a.m., a 45-minute train ride away from my house, all in French with all French students. And it was on like the history of the postal service in France, which I don't know how I got the idea to sign up for it, but I did. But yeah, I would recommend you take a class at a French university or Spanish university, but just one and not at 8 a.m. so that you get the experience, but also don't hate yourself.
Chloe?
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry,
Megan, go for it.
Okay. Well, I think if you're going to take a class in language, especially with speakers of the other language, know that you're going to do that and then begin preparing. That's huge. There are so many resources online like italki or email me, I'll send you some French class materials that you can do to prep yourself. Because I think for me personally as a speaker, interpretive listening comprehension is the part that is the hardest for me. And so as I work with my kids on this exact thing that is hard for me as well, I think it's so important you got to psych yourself up. You have to realize that you are not going to understand everything and that's okay. You need to use context, look for words that you do understand. That is a skill in and of itself, using context to guide understanding. And you will learn so much from simply that alone. So I would say prepare, and also psych yourself up for it and know that it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a worthwhile one.
Chloe, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, echoing her sentiment, just knowing that it's hard to learn a language. It's not going, for most people, it's not going to be a very easy thing to do. And I think the professors understand that, and in my experience, we're very willing to help and provide additional resources and websites and things and tutors that you could go to help you learn the language. But I think, just like Meg said, you're going to have to put in the time really, and practice outside in any ways that you can. Listen to French songs, find French movies, articles, anything that will help you build up those skills outside of the classroom too. Those will be super helpful, you know, and will help you if you decide to go abroad as well.
Oh, there we go. I think as far as advice, um, one of the other things that I worked as a French tutor um, at OWU as well. And one of the things that students would often struggle with, and they express frustration about it, is not being able to necessarily pronounce a lot of the words. And that's another thing, yes, absolutely. You could dominate finding context clues and know how to read in French, but then speaking it is another beast as well. Um, so I think that it's a matter of understanding that you might not pronounce the word like sounding like you come from a French speaking country, but at least getting into the muscle memory of being able to get the basic sound of it out. Like, a lot of Americans might not be able to roll their R's or do that sound that a lot of French words have that comes from the back of your throat. Um, Not everyone can do that, but at least if you can get the basic sound out, you can definitely get the gist of the word out. It's a lot, but it's a lot of muscle memory too. So also, aside from training your brain, you also need to kind of train at least your jaw to be able to sound out what it is you're trying to say, because that's how you're going to get people to understand you, at least in a basic point. So that's another bit of advice. It's a lot of mental work. It is also some muscle memory, but if you put the time into it, just like, everyone else said, you can definitely do it. You're not going to learn a language in a semester. That's not only like a select few people can manage to do that. Chances are you might not be one of them, but in that case, you just have to put in some extra work and you'll get it done.
Yeah.
And I also think be kind to yourself. That's a big one. I mean, I've been learning French for my entire life, and technically the certificate I have says that I'm fluent. However, right now I can barely hold a conversation in the language, which makes me feel really bad. And it's just because I've been spending all my time learning a different language that kind of overwrites the French. So there is that piece of no matter what you're doing, language is hard for everyone. So if you've spent 24 hours a day on it, you're probably still not going to be perfect, and that's really okay.
There's no such thing as like I often hear my kids like, oh, I'm just not a language learner. Like, I'm just not, that's not me. Everyone can do it. You just have to find something that is going to inspire you to do it, which it sounds like all of you have found because you're here. And B, you have to find a way to love the process, and then you're good.